The demographics of the People's Republic of China are identified by a large population with a relatively small youth division, which is partially a result of China's one-child policy. Chinese population reached the billion mark in 1982. China's population is over 1.355 billion, the largest of any country in the world. According to the 2010 census, 91.51% of the population was of the Han Chinese, and 8.49% were minorities. China's population growth rate is only 0.47%, ranking 159th in the world. China conducted its sixth national population census on November 1, 2010. Unless otherwise indicated, the statistics on this page pertain to mainland China only. See also Demographics of Hong Kong, Demographics of Macau, and Demographics of Taiwan. Population. Historical population, 2100 BC, 4 million, 700 BC, 12 million, 210 BC, 21 million, 2 AD, 58 million, 57, 38 million, 290, 24 million, 630, 49 million, 800, 70 million, 1000, 87 million, 1100, 102 million, 1200. 105 million, 1290, 77 million, 1400, 89 million, 1500, 110 million, 1650, 123 million, 1800, 260 million, 1900, 400 million, 1910. 439,214,000, in 1910. The population of China was almost a quarter of world population according to census. Censuses in China. The People's Republic of China conducted censuses in 1953, 1964, 1982, 1990, 2000, and 2010. In 1987, the government announced that the fourth national census would take place in 1990 and that there would be one every 10 years thereafter. The 1982 census is generally accepted as significantly more reliable, accurate, and thorough than the previous two. Various international organizations eagerly assisted the Chinese in conducting the 1982 census, including the United Nations Fund for Population Activities, which donated $15.6 million for the preparation and execution of the census. China has been the world's most populous nation for many centuries. When China took its first post-1949 census in 1953, the population stood at 583 million. By the fifth census in 2000, the population had more than doubled, reaching 1.2 billion. In the 1920s and 1930s, Chinese interest in social programs through reproductive control, including eugenics, intensified. Beginning in the mid-1950s, the Chinese government introduced, with varying degrees of success, a number of family planning, or population control, campaigns and programs. China's fast-growing population was a major policy matter for its leaders in the mid-20th century, so that in the early 1970s, the government implemented the stringent one-child policy. Under this policy, which had different guidelines for national minorities, married couples were officially permitted only one child. As a result of the policy, China successfully achieved its goal of a more stable and much reduced fertility rate. In 2010, women had an average of 1.54 children versus an estimated 5.4 children in 1971. Enforcement of the program, however, varied considerably from place to place, depending on the vigilance of local population control workers. In 1982, China conducted its first population census since 1964. It was by far the most thorough and accurate census taken since 1949 and confirmed that China was a nation of more than 1 billion people, or about one-fifth of the world's population. The census provided demographers with a set of data on China's age-sex structure, fertility and mortality rates, and population density and distribution. Information was also gathered on minority ethnic groups, urban population, and marital status. For the first time since the People's Republic of China was founded, demographers had reliable information on the size and composition of the Chinese workforce. the nation began preparing for the 1982 census in late 1976. Chinese census workers were sent to the United States and Japan to study modern census-taking techniques and automation. Computers were installed in every provincial-level unit except Tibet and were connected to a central processing system in the Beijing headquarters of the State Statistical Bureau. Pretests and small-scale trial runs were conducted and checked for accuracy between 1980 and 1981 in 24 provincial-level units. Census stations were opened in rural production brigades and urban neighborhoods. Beginning July 1, 1982, each household sent a representative to a census station to be enumerated. The census required about a month to complete and employed approximately 5 million census takers. The 1982 census collected data in 19 demographic categories relating to individuals and households. The 13 areas concerning individuals were name, relationship to head of household, sex, age, nationality, registration status, educational level, profession, occupation, status of non-working persons, marital status, number of children born and still living, and number of births in 1981. The 6 items pertaining to households were type, serial number, number of persons, number of births in 1981, number of deaths in 1981, and number of registered persons absent for more than 1 year. Information was gathered in a number of important areas for which previous data were either extremely inaccurate or simply non-existent, including fertility, marital status, urban population, minority ethnic groups, sex composition, age distribution, and employment and unemployment. A fundamental anomaly in the 1982 statistics was noted by some Western analysts. They pointed out that although the birth and death rates recorded by the census and those recorded through the household registration system were different, the two systems arrived at similar population totals. The discrepancies in the vital rates were the result of the underreporting of both births and deaths to the authorities under the registration system. Families would not report some births because of the one-child policy and would not report some deaths so as to hold on to the rations of the deceased. Nevertheless, the 1982 census was a watershed for both Chinese and world demographics. After an 18-year gap, population specialists were given a wealth of reliable, up-to-date figures on which to reconstruct past demographic patterns, measure current population conditions, and predict future population trends. For example, Chinese and foreign demographers used the 1982 census age-sex structure as the base population for forecasting and making assumptions about future fertility trends. The data on age-specific fertility and mortality rates provided the necessary baseline information for making population projections. The census data also were useful for estimating future manpower potential, consumer needs, and utility, energy, and health service requirements. The sudden abundance of demographic data helped population specialists immeasurably in their efforts to estimate world population. Previously, there had been no accurate information on these 21% of the Earth's inhabitants. Demographers who had been conducting research on global population without accurate data on the Chinese fifth of the world's population were particularly thankful for the 1982 breakthrough census. Population control. Initially, China's post-1949 leaders were ideologically disposed to view a large population as an asset. But the liabilities of a large, rapidly growing population soon became apparent. For 1 year, starting in August 1956, vigorous support was given to the Ministry of Public Health's mass birth control efforts. These efforts, however, had little impact on fertility. After the interval of the Great Leap Forward, Chinese leaders again saw rapid population growth as an obstacle to development, and their interest in birth control revived. In the early 1960s, schemes somewhat more muted than during the first campaign, emphasized the virtues of late marriage. Birth control offices were set up in the central government and some provincial-level governments in 1964. The second campaign was particularly successful in the cities, where the birth rate was cut in half during the 1963–66 period. The upheaval of the Cultural Revolution brought the program to a halt, however. In 1972 and 1973 the party mobilized its resources for a nationwide birth control campaign administered by a group in the State Council. Committees to oversee birth control activities were established at all administrative levels and in various collective enterprises. This extensive and seemingly effective network covered both the rural and the urban population. In urban areas, public security headquarters included population control sections. In rural areas, the country's barefoot doctors distributed information and contraceptives to people's commune members. By 1973, Mao Zedong was personally identified with the family planning movement, signifying a greater leadership commitment to controlled population growth than ever before. Yet until several years after Mao's death in 1976, the leadership was reluctant to put forth directly the rationale that population control was necessary for economic growth and improved living standards. Population growth targets were set for both administrative units and individual families. In the mid-1970s, the maximum recommended family size was 2 children in cities and 3 or 4 in the country. Since 1979, the government has advocated a one-child limit for both rural and urban areas and has generally set a maximum of 2 children in special circumstances. As of 1986, the policy for minority nationalities was 2 children per couple, 3 in special circumstances, and no limit for ethnic groups with very small populations. The overall goal of the one-child policy was to keep the total population within 1.2 billion through the year 2000, on the premise that the 4 modernizations program would be of little value if population growth was not brought under control. The one-child policy was a highly ambitious population control program. Like previous programs of the 1960s and 1970s, the one-child policy employed a combination of public education, social pressure, and in some cases coercion. The one-child policy was unique, however, in that it linked reproduction with economic cost or benefit. Under the one-child program, a sophisticated system rewarded those who observed the policy and penalized those who did not. Couples with only one child were given a one-child certificate entitling them to such benefits as cash bonuses, longer maternity leave, better child care, and preferential housing assignments. In return, they were required to pledge that they would not have more children. In the countryside, there was great pressure to adhere to the one-child limit. Because the rural population accounted for approximately 60% of the total, the effectiveness of the one-child policy in rural areas was considered the key to the success or failure of the program as a whole. In rural areas, the day-to-day work of family planning was done by cadres at the team and brigade levels who were responsible for women's affairs and by health workers. The women's team leader made regular household visits to keep track of the status of each family under her jurisdiction and collected information on which women were using contraceptives, the methods used, and which had become pregnant. She then reported to the brigade women's leader, who documented the information and took it to a monthly meeting of the Commune Birth Planning Committee. According to reports, ceilings or quotas had to be adhered to. To satisfy these cutoffs, unmarried young people were persuaded to postpone marriage, couples without children were advised to wait their turn, women with unauthorized pregnancies were pressured to have abortions, and those who already had children were urged to use contraception or undergo sterilization. Couples with more than one child were exhorted to be sterilized. The one-child policy enjoyed much greater success in urban than in rural areas. Even without state intervention, there were compelling reasons for urban couples to limit the family to a single child. Raising a child required a significant portion of family income, and in the cities a child did not become an economic asset until he or she entered the workforce at age 16. Couples with only one child were given preferential treatment in housing allocation. In addition, because city dwellers who were employed in state enterprises received pensions after retirement, the sex of their first child was less important to them than it was to those in rural areas. Numerous reports surfaced of coercive measures used to achieve the desired results of the one-child policy. The alleged methods ranged from intense psychological pressure to the use of physical force, including some grisly accounts of forced abortions and infanticide. Chinese officials admitted that isolated, uncondoned abuses of the program occurred and that they condemned such acts, but they insisted that the family planning program was administered on a voluntary basis using persuasion and economic measures only. International reaction to the allegations were mixed. The Union Fund for Population Activities and the International Planned Parenthood Federation were generally supportive of China's family planning program. The United States Agency for International Development, however, withdrew $10 million from the fund in March 1985 based on allegations that coercion had been used. Observers suggested that inaccurate assessment of the one-child program would not be possible until all women who came of childbearing age in the early 1980s passed their fertile years. As of 1987, the one-child program had achieved mixed results. In general, it was very successful in almost all urban areas but less successful in rural areas. Rapid fertility reduction associated with the one-child policy has potentially negative results. For instance, in the future the elderly might not be able to rely on their children to care for them as they have in the past, leaving the state to assume the expense, which could be considerable. Based on United Nations and Chinese government statistics, it was estimated in 1987 that by the year 2000 the population 60 years and older would number 127 million, or 10.1% of the total population. The projection for 2025 was 234 million elderly, or 16.4%. According to projections based on the 1982 census, if the one-child policy were maintained to the year 2000, 25% of China's population would be age 65 or older by the year 2040. Population density and distribution. Overall, China is the most populated country in the world and its national population density is similar to those of Switzerland and the Czech Republic. The overall population density of China conceals major regional variations. The western and northern part have a few million people, while eastern half has about 1.3 billion. The vast majority of China's population lives near the eastern major cities. Coast and eastern China, in the 11 provinces, special municipalities, and autonomous regions along the southeast coast, population density was 320.6 people per km2. Broadly speaking, the population was concentrated east of the mountains and south of the northern steppe. The most densely populated areas included the Yangtze River Valley, Sichuan Basin, North China Plain, Pearl River Delta, and the industrial area around the city of Qianyang in the northeast. Western areas, population is most sparse in the mountainous, desert, and grassland regions of the northwest and southwest. In Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, portions are completely uninhabited, and only a few sections have populations denser than 10 people per km2. The Inner Mongolia, Xinjiang, and Tibet Autonomous Regions and Qinghai and Gansu provinces comprise 55% of the country's land area but in 1985 contained only 5.7% of its population. Gender disparity concern. Future challenges for China will be the gender disparity. According to the 2010 census, males account for 51.27% of China's 1.34 billion people, while females made up 48.73% of the total. The sex ratio at birth was 118.06 boys to every 100 girls in 2010, higher than the 116.86 of 2000, but 0.53 points lower than the ratio of 118.59 in 2005. In most Western countries the sex ratio at birth is around 105 boys to 100 girls. At the moment there are about 9 million more boys than girls in China. Population projection, U.S. Census Bureau, 2010 ist, 2021 1,384,545,000, 2030, 1,391,491,000, 2040, 1,358,519,000, 2050, 1,303,723,000, United Nations, 2010 ist, 2021 1,387,792,000, 2030. 1,393,076,000, 2040, 1,360,906,000, 2050, 1,295,604,000, 2060. 1,211,538,000, 2070, 1,125,903,000, 2080, 1,048,132,000, 2090, 984,547,000, 2100, 941,042,000. Vital statistics, Table of births and deaths 1950 to 2013, fertility and mortality. In 1949 crude death rates were probably higher than 30 per 1,000, and the average life expectancy was only 35 years. Beginning in the early 1950s, mortality steadily declined. It continued to decline through 1978 and remained relatively constant through 1987. One major fluctuation was reported in a computer reconstruction of China's population trends from 1953 to 1987 produced by the United States Bureau of the Census. The computer model showed that the crude death rate increased dramatically during the famine years associated with the Great Leap Forward. According to Chinese government statistics, the crude birth rate followed 5 distinct patterns from 1949 to 1982. It remained stable from 1949 to 1954, varied widely from 1955 to 1965, experienced fluctuations between 1966 and 1969, dropped sharply in the late 1970s, and increased from 1980 to 1981. Between 1970 and 1980, the crude birth rate dropped from 33.4 per 1,000 to 18.2 per 1,000. The government attributed this dramatic decline in fertility to the WCN's HCO birth control campaign. However, elements of socio-economic change, such as increased employment of women in both urban and rural areas and reduced infant mortality, may have played some role. The birth rate increased in the 1980s to a level over 20 per 1,000, primarily as a result of a marked rise in marriages and first births. The rise was an indication of problems with the one-child policy of 1979. Chinese sources, however, indicate that the birth rate started to decrease again in the 1990s and reached a level of around 12 per 1,000 in recent years. In urban areas, the housing shortage may have been at least partly responsible for the decreased birth rate. Also, the policy enforced during most of the 1960s and the early 1970s of sending large numbers of high school graduates to the countryside deprived cities of a significant proportion of persons of childbearing age and undoubtedly had some effect on birth rates. Primarily for economic reasons, rural birth rates tended to decline less than urban rates. The right to grow and sell agricultural products for personal profit and the lack of an old age welfare system were incentives for rural people to produce many children, especially sons, for help in the fields and for support in old age. Because of these conditions, it is unclear to what degree education had been able to erode traditional values favoring large families. Today, the population continues to grow. There is also a serious gender imbalance. Census data obtained in 2000 revealed that 119 boys were born for every 100 girls, and among China unregistered trademark floating population the ratio was as high as 128:100. These situations led the government in July 2004 to ban selective abortions of female fetuses. It is estimated that this imbalance will rise until 2025 or 2030 to reach 20% then slowly decrease. China now has an increasingly aging population. It is projected that 11.8% of the population in 2020 will be 65 years of age and older. Healthcare has improved dramatically in China since 1949. Major diseases such as cholera, typhoid, and scarlet fever have been brought under control. Life expectancy has more than doubled, and infant mortality has dropped significantly. On the negative side, the incidence of cancer, cerebrovascular disease, and heart disease has increased to the extent that these have become the leading causes of death. Economic reforms initiated in the late 1970s fundamentally altered methods of providing health care. The collective medical care system has been gradually replaced by a more individual-oriented approach. In Hong Kong, the birth rate of 0.9% is lower than its death rate. Hong Kong's population increases because of immigration from the mainland and a large expatriate population comprising about 4%. Like Hong Kong, Macau also has a low birth rate relying on immigration to maintain its population. Total fertility rate, according to the 2000 census, the TFR was 1.22. Beijing had the lowest TFR at 0.67, while Guizhou had the highest at 2.19. The Xiangyang district of Jiamusi City has a TFR of 0.41, which is the lowest TFR recorded anywhere in the world in recorded history. Other extremely low TFR counties are 0.43 in the Heping district of Tianjin City, and 0.46 in the Maui district of Zhou City. At the other end TFR was 3.96 in Jeji County, 4.07 in Jiali County, and 5.47 in Beicong County. The 2010 census reported a TFR of 1.18. The 5 regions with the lowest fertility rates were Beijing, Shanghai, Liaoning, Heilongjiang, and Jilin. The 5 regions with the highest fertility rates were Guangxi, Guizhou, Xinjiang, Hainan, and Anhui. Total fertility rate by ethnic group: Han, Zhuang, Hui, Manchu, Uyghur, Myor, Yi, Tujia, Tibetan, Mongols. Labor force: in 2012, for the first time, according to statistics released by China's National Bureau of Statistics in January 2013, the number of people theoretically able to enter the Chinese labor force shrank slightly to 937.27 million people, a decrease of 3.45 million from 2011. This trend, resulting from China's successful one-child policy of population control, is anticipated to continue for at least the next 20 years, to 2030. The CIA World Factbook estimates the actual active labor force to amount to 798.5 million. Ethnic groups. The People's Republic of China officially recognizes 56 distinct ethnic groups, the largest of which are Han, who constitute 91.51% of the total population in 2010. Ethnic minorities constitute 8.49% or 113.8 million of China's population in 2010. During the past decades, ethnic minorities have experienced higher growth rates than the majority Han population, because they are not under the one-child policy. Their proportion of the population in China has grown from 6.1% in 1953, to 8.04% in 1990, 8.41% in 2000 and 8.49% in 2010. Large ethnic minorities include the Zhuang, Manchu, Uyghur, Hui, Myor, Yi, Tujia, Mongols, Tibetan, Bil, and Korean. Neither Hong Kong nor Macau recognizes the official ethnic classifications maintained by the central government. In Macau, the largest substantial ethnic groups of non-Chinese descent are the Macanese, of mixed Chinese and Portuguese descent, as well as migrants from the Philippines and Thailand. Overseas Filipinos working as domestic workers comprise the largest non-Han Chinese ethnic group in Hong Kong. People from other immigration jurisdictions. The 2010 census counted 234,829 residents from Hong Kong, 21,201 residents from Macau, 170,283 residents from Taiwan, and 593,832 residents from other locations, totaling 1,020,145 residents. Languages. The official spoken standard in the People's Republic of China is Putonghua. Its pronunciation is based on the Beijing dialect of Mandarin, which was traditionally the formal version of the Mandarin or Chinese language. Other languages and dialects include other Mandarin dialects, and Wu, Yu, Minbei, Minnan, Xiang, Gan and Hakka, as well as languages of the minorities. The 7 major mutually unintelligible Chinese dialects are considered by some to be different languages of the Chinese language family, and by some others to be dialects of the Chinese language. Each of these dialects has many sub-dialects. Over 70% of the Han ethnic group are native speakers of the Mandarin group of dialects spoken in northern and southwestern China. The rest, concentrated in South and Southeast China, speak one of the 6 other major Chinese dialects. In addition to the local dialect, Nearly all also speak Standard Chinese or Mandarin, which pronunciation is based on the Beijing dialect, which itself is one of the Mandarin group of dialects, and is the language of instruction in all schools and is used for formal and official purposes. Non-Chinese languages spoken widely by ethnic minorities include Mongolian, Tibetan, Uyghur and other Turkic languages, Korean, and Vietnamese. In addition to Chinese, in the special administrative regions, English is an official language of Hong Kong and Portuguese is an official language of Macau. Patois is a Portuguese Creole spoken by a small number of Macanese. English, though not official, is widely used in Macau. In both of the special administrative regions, the dominant spoken form of Chinese is Cantonese. For written Chinese, the PRC officially uses simplified Chinese characters in mainland China, while traditional Chinese characters are used in Hong Kong and Macau. The de facto spoken standard in Hong Kong and Macau is Cantonese, although officially it is just the Chinese language, not specifying which spoken form is standard. The written official standard in Hong Kong and Macau is Mandarin in traditional Chinese characters. On January 1, 1979, the PRC government officially adopted the Hanyu pinyin system for spelling Chinese names and places in mainland China in Roman letters. A system of romanization invented by the Chinese, pinyin has long been widely used in mainland China on street and commercial signs as well as in elementary Chinese textbooks as an aid in learning Chinese characters. Variations of pinyin also are used as the written forms of several minority languages. Pinyin replaced other conventional spellings in mainland China's English-language publications. The U.S. government and United Nations also adopted the pinyin system for all names of people and places in mainland China. For example, the capital of the PRC is spelled Beijing rather than Peking. Religions. The Chinese government has implemented state atheism since 1949. In recent years, the Chinese government has opened up to religion, especially traditional religions such as Mahayana Buddhism, Taoism and Confucianism because the government also continued to emphasize the role of religion in building a socialist harmonious society, which was a positive development with regard to the government's respect for religious freedom. Today, according to different surveys, local ethnic religions, which sometimes fall under the label of Taoism or are administered by the Taoist clergy, are the dominant, being practiced by over 30% of the Chinese population. Buddhism is practiced by between 10.85% and 18% of the Chinese. Christianity is practiced by 3.2%, 4% to 5% of the population, while Islam by 2% of the population. An extensive Chinese spiritual life survey conducted in 2010 by Dr. Feng Gang Yang and the Purdue University Unregistered Trademark S Center on Religion and Chinese Society, also taking into account local religions, has revealed the following results. Many types of Chinese folk religions and Taoism are practiced by hundreds of millions of people, and of these 754 million people practice Chinese ancestral worship. 173 million practice Taoism on a level indistinguishable from the folk religion, and 12 million people identify exclusively with Taoism. 185 million people identify as Buddhist, of which only 17,300,000 are formal initiates. 33 million identify as Christians, of which 30 million are Protestants and 3 million are Catholics. An additional 23 million people are Muslims. As highlighted, the practice of Taoism and various Chinese folk religions easily blurs. Also, many Buddhists may also practice the worship of ancestors and gods. Some of the ethnic minorities of China practice their indigenous religions, for example Dongbaism is the traditional religion of the Naki people, Muslim that of the Zhuang people, and Ruism that of the Kayang people. The traditional indigenous religion of Tibet is Bar paragraph N, while most of Tibetans follow Tibetan Buddhism, a form of Vajrayana. However, Tibetan Buddhism has also spread to other areas of China adopted by many Han Chinese. Mahayana Buddhism and its subsets Pure Land, Tiantai and Kawen are the most widely practiced denominations of Buddhism. Theravada is practiced largely by ethnic minorities along the southern geographic fringes of the Chinese mainland. China also has numerous minority religions such as Xiantiande, Zaliism and Deism. The Basic Law of Hong Kong protects freedom of religion as a fundamental right. There are a large variety of religious groups in the Hong Kong: Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Christianity including Catholicism, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism and Judaism all have a considerable number of adherents. The Macau Basic Law similarly recognizes freedom of religion, though the Religious Freedom Ordinance requires registration of religious organizations. The major religions practiced in Macau are Buddhism and traditional beliefs, with a smaller minority claiming no religious belief. A small minority of Christians, mostly Catholic, exists. Migration. Urbanization. CIA World Factbook. The following demographic statistics are from the CIA World Factbook, unless otherwise indicated. No statistics have been included for areas currently governed by the Republic of China. Unless stated otherwise, statistics refer only to mainland China. Population, mainland only, 1,338,612,968, Hong Kong, 7,055,071, Macau, 559,846, total, 1,346,227,885. Population rank, 1. Urban-rural ratio, urban, 49.68% AA Euro 665,570,000, rural, 50.32% AA Euro 674,150,000, age structure. 0 Euro 14 years, 16.60%, 15 Euro 64 years, 72.1%, population growth rate, 0.57%, sex distribution, male 51.27%, female 48.73%, sex ratio, at birth, 1.133 male, S/female, under 15 years, 1.17 male, S/female, 15 Euro 64 years, 1.06 male, S/female, 65 years and over, 0.93 male, S/female, total population, 1.06 male, S/female, infant mortality rate, total, 15.2 deaths/1,000 live births, male, 15.16 deaths/1,000 live births, female, 15.25 deaths/1,000 live births. See infant mortality in China. Child mortality, 415,000 children died in China in 2006, life expectancy at birth, total population, 74.99 years, male, 72.96 years, female, 77.27 years, marriage and divorce, marriage rate, 6.3/1,000 population, divorce rate, 1.0/1,000 population, literacy rate, age 15 and over can read and write, total population, 95.92%, male, 95.1%, female, 86.5%. Educational attainment, as of 2000, percentage of population age 15 and over having no schooling and incomplete primary, 15.6%, completed primary, 35.7%, some secondary, 34.0%, complete secondary, 11.1%, some post-secondary through advanced degree, 3.6%, religious affiliation. Predominantly, Mahayana Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. Others, Christianity, Islam, ethnic minority religions, others. Note, state atheism, but traditionally pragmatic and eclectic. Sources, major cities. Only urban population stated, as of 2005, Shenzhen 10,357,968, Shanghai 10,030,800, Beijing 7,699,300, Shenzhou 6,521,300, Tianjin 4,933,100, Guangzhou 4,653,100, Wuhan 4,593,400, Chongqing 4,239,700, Shenyang 3,995,500, Nanjing 2,966,000, Harbin 2,735,100, Xi'an 2,664,000, Xia Euro unregistered trademark and 2,657,900, Jinan 2,346,000, Changkung 2,283,800, Dalian 2,181,600, Hanzhou 2,059,800, Shihuan 1,971,000, Tian 1,970,300, Qingdao 1,930,200, Zhenzhou 1,770,800, Kunming 1,597,800, Lanzhou 1,576,400, Changsha 1,562,200, Xiamen 1,532,200. Households, average household size, 3.10, total households, 401,520,000, of which are family households, 340,491,197, of which are collective households, 10,742,501. HIV, see HIV/AIDS in China. Adult population living with HIV, 0.15%, people living with HIV/AIDS, 100,000, HIV/AIDS deaths, 44,000, causes of death, major causes of death per 100,000 population, based on 2004 urban population samples, malignant neoplasms, 119.7, cerebrovascular disease, 88.4, respiratory diseases, 78.1, heart diseases, 74.1, accidents, violence, and poisoning, 43.5, income. As of 2003, the distribution of urban household income, average per capita disposable income by quintile, Y. 9,061, US $1,398, first quintile, Y 3,285 second quintile, Y 5,377, third quintile, Y 7,279, fourth quintile, Y 9,763, fifth quintile, Y 17,431. Working life, quality of working life, average work week, 40 hours, annual rate per 100,000 workers for injury or accident, 0.7, industrial illness, 36, death, 1.4. Death toll from work accidents, 127,000, funds for pensions and social welfare relief, Y 26,668,000,000, access to services, percentage of population having access to electricity, 98.6%, percentage of total population with safe public water supply, 83.6%, sewage system, total, households with flush apparatus 20.7%, with pit latrines 69.3%, with no latrine 5.3%. Social participation, eligible voters participating in last national election, ENA, population participating in voluntary work, ENA, trade union membership in total labor force, 18%, practicing religious population in total affiliated population, ENA, social deviance, annual reported arrest rate per 100,000 population for property violation, 20.7, infringing personal rights, 7.2, disruption of social administration, 3.3, endangering public security, 1.010, material well-being, urban households possessing, bicycles 1.4, color televisions, 1.3, washing machines, 0.9, refrigerators, 0.9, cameras, 0.5, rural families possessing, bicycles 1.2, color televisions, 0.7, washing machines, 0.2, refrigerators, 0.1, cameras, 0.02, household income and expenditure, average household size 3.1. Rural households 3.3. Urban households 3.0. Average annual per capita disposable income of household, rural households Y 3,255, urban households Y 10,493. Sources of income, rural households Euro income from household businesses 75.7%, wages 19.1%, transfers 3.7%, other 1.5%. Urban households Euro wages 70.7%, transfers 23.3%, business income 4.5%, other 1.5%. Expenditure, rural households Euro food 45.6%, housing 15.9%, education and recreation 12.1%, transportation and communications 8.4%, clothing 5.7%, medicine and medical service 6.0%, household furnishings 4.2%. Employment, population economically active, total 760,800,000. Activity rate of total population 58.9%. Urban employed workforce, 239,400,000. By sector, state enterprises 76,400,000, collectives 28,130,000, self-employment or privately run enterprises 134,870,000. Rural employed workforce, 490,850,000. See also: Metropolitan regions of China, Metropolitan cities of China, Demography of Central Asia, Demographics of Beijing, Notes. References. This article incorporates a public domain material from the Library of Congress Country Studies document A Country Study, China. This article incorporates a public domain material from websites or documents of the CIA World Factbook. External links: China Population Information and Research Center, China Population Association, National Population and Family Planning Commission, Cass Institute of Population and Labor Economics, China Statistical Information Net, Office of the National Working Committee on Aging, China's State Council's Vice-Ministerial Level Institution on Aging, China Population Welfare Foundation, China Reproductive Health Network, Chinese Journal of Population Science A Euro SHA 1/2 AAG Section AA Euro, Chinese Journal of Population, Resources and Environment A 1/2 ABE Micron EACA St. Florin, China, Population by Age and Sex, 1952. 2050. Proportion elderly, working age, and children, China's population composition over time, 1950 to 2050, United Nations World Population Prospects Country Profile, China, the 200 Best Books on China.